Hey everyone, welcome back to the NeoMarketing Podcast Season 2, year number 2.
Amazing.
Right, we did 52 weeks the first year, weekly. This is the beginning of our biweekly format.
Yeah.
We're going to go a little bit longer. In the future, we'll have some more guests on, do some different topics, go deeper, and having 2 weeks in between each show, first and third Wednesdays of each month. It's not the Thursdays that we've been doing, it'll be Wednesdays. It'll allow us to put some more information out on social media about topics, ask questions, answer questions we get, and do some interaction online before and after each show.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to that.
Looking forward to that.
So today we're going to talk about the power of sound.
Okay.
So here we go, folks. The NeoMarketing Podcast.
Bam.
Welcome to the Golden Group NeoMarketing Podcast, a bi-weekly discussion of modern business communication. Good morning, Pritch. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm still vertical.
Oh, that's a good thing. Very good thing indeed. So today we're going to talk about the power of sound, what sound does to our brains and how we're using it in communication today.
Okay.
And it's going to lead us down a path of the fact that all types of communication has changed. That's advertising, that is public relations, that is internal and external. It's every type of communication changed mostly because of technology and the way human beings are interacting with technology these days, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so the old way of doing things is out in general, across the board. It's not 3 TV stations, 1 radio station, one newspaper anymore.
Right.
Right? So everyone is paying attention to communication in a different way.
Correct.
You're more likely to be looking at something like this, right, than a TV or listening to a radio.
Right, the fourth screen.
Even radio in the car is streaming and other formats, right? Podcast is a big part of that.
Right.
So as marketing, advertising, communication professionals, we have to be paying attention to the ideas of using audio in a new and different way in order to communicate our message because our audience has changed how they're taking in messages, right?
Well, I think it's new, but it's the same too. I mean, it is a communication tool, and if we're using it right, then, it's the right strategy to use, but
best
it's
practices
also
are
new.
Still best practices.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. So
at the end of the day, it's attention.
Yeah.
Are you more likely to watch a TV screen, watch a computer screen, watch a smartphone or a tablet? Smartphone or a tablet, right?
Right.
So we as marketing, advertisers, communicators have to adapt our approach.
You bet, because they are different. While they're the same, they're different.
Right. And at the end of the day, business and specifically marketing is all about adaptation, right?
Absolutely.
You put out what you do, the market reacts to it, you make adjustments, adapt, and then you move forward, and it changes on the regular. You can't do what you've always done 10, 20, 30, 40 years, right?
Right, and you always have to check and make sure that what you're doing is still working.
That's right. So I'm going to start with the power of podcast.
Okay.
Podcasts are huge right now. They're really making an impact. They were around for a while. They sort of went away.
Right, but they're back now with a vengeance.
People figured things out. Yeah. Apple put their weight behind it a little bit. And now podcasts are really taken on. And in fact, podcasts are becoming much more important than a lot of other broadcast media.
Absolutely. In fact, I do a poll every time with my classes at the start of a semester, and by a vast majority, students are getting a lot of their information via podcasts today. And
they're creating loyalty.
Absolutely.
They're absolutely loyal to the podcast that they're paying attention to. The same way, back in the day, you were loyal to a TV station or to a newscaster.
Right.
So, yes, it's a thing now, right?
Yeah, it is. It's back.
What's great about it is it's passive delivery.
Yes.
You don't have to, like when you're watching a video or watching a movie or watching the news on TV, you have to watch it. You have to look at it. You have to see what's going on the screen. You have to look at the person talking to you. You don't have to do that with a podcast.
Right. And you can do it anywhere. It's asynchronous.
That's right.
So
in the car, on the train,
on the treadmill.
That's where I listen to all mine, is on the treadmill for sure. You also can listen passively while you're working or doing other things, and then stop like, wait, what's that? Back it up and listen again.
Right.
So you're almost scanning for the information you're looking for.
Right.
What's interesting about it is I've seen a lot of articles recently, from multiple sources, that are not only talking about the power of podcast, how many people are turning in, that attention we're all looking for, but the loyalty that's created by sponsoring a podcast.
Right.
And it goes back to every type of marketing we talk about, right? It has to make sense, it has to be authentic, it has to be connecting with the right audience.
Right.
So you can't just sponsor any podcast out there. And you also can over-sponsor well, right? You can, make sure you're plugging and making commercials. Right. And so then you're defeating the purpose.
People don't want that, right.
You're defeating the purpose by making the podcast you're sponsoring read your ad copy.
Right.
As opposed to brought to you by,
right.
Brought to you by the Golden Group has a lot more effectiveness than a stop midway to deliver a message, because that's the advertising no one wants anymore.
Right.
We don't want to see TV commercials. We don't want our day interrupted, our information stream, our entertainment interrupted by advertising.
Where's my fast forward button?
Right. So the other aspect here is that audiences are more sophisticated as it comes to advertising and communication messages.
Right. They know when they're being advertised to. Right.
So no one wants to be sold even when they're looking to buy something.
Right.
They want to be, pushed into a agreement to buy something. They want to find something, make a connection to it, and then make a purchase that feels good to them for their reasons.
Right.
Which is why advertising is a turnoff. And audiences are sophisticated now, because not only are we getting our advertising in different ways, but we're creating content too. Every person with a smartphone can create their own content.
Sure.
Whether it's an entrepreneur, their business, their self-brand, it could be a side hustle, it could be their hobby, it could be just groups they're interested in, it could be politics, it could be anything, right? Back in the day, you couldn't just broadcast videos about I'm going to vote for this person, or I'm going to go do this thing, or who likes to collect comic books.
Right.
You couldn't do that back in the day. But now you can, and so that power makes the end user, when we as marketers are trying to approach them, gain their attention, and motivate them to do something, it makes it harder to do because they understand the process. They're doing it themselves.
Right, exactly. And today's phone filming in 4K, we had that discussion this morning over a client that we've done some work with over the past couple of years through Lindsay and Asp. And past couple of years, we've done digital SLRs and just found that they were too cumbersome for the immediacy that we needed. And one of the students in the conversation this morning said, my phone gets 4K.
Absolutely.
So it is absolutely changing all the time.
We're shooting this on a 4K mirrorless camera, which is smaller than a DSLR, but not a huge expensive. It's not a $50,000 camera. It's not even a $5,000 camera. But we're shooting a backup on an iPhone as well that's shooting 4K.
Right.
And occasionally we've used the iPhone footage, and you guys never know because it's really good footage.
Yeah.
And again, that is something that's in your pocket. Everyone has access to, right?
So everybody can be a content producer.
Right. So going back to podcasts. The reason they work, the reason people pay attention to them is it's not advertising, it's telling a story. People love stories.
Right.
It's creating a conversation like we're trying to do here. We're talking, easy for me to say.
Easy for you to say.
About topics, but we're hoping to get interaction from people to see the show. We want them to reach out to us on social media, make comments, review the podcast, etc., and tell us what they like and don't like so we can adjust to it.
A dialogue.
Right, exactly. So with all of that happening, you can have a deeper connection, a conversation, a different story, tell your story in a different way that's not advertising for people to go, oh, now I understand what it is you do, the why. Right, we talk about Simon Sinek and why a lot.
We'll talk some more about that.
That's what you get to do in a podcast conversation or a passive audio conversation.
Yeah.
So that's the value of podcast is tell your story without advertising. Tell people what you do, what you're interested in, what engages you as leadership, as people on the team working for the business, how you interact with customers, what customers like. All that can come through on a podcast.
Right.
That's not advertising, and the audience can say, "Oh, I get it, I connect," or I don't. And the ones who don't, that's fine. You only want to connect with the people who get what you do, the way you do it, right?
Right, exactly.
So you get a deeper conversation. You also get to provide some of the personalities of some of the people that work within the business. Businesses are not people, they consist of people, right? So the reason a lot of people do business with someone is they like the people involved. So why don't we let people meet the people via podcast and via other non-advertising avenues? That's what podcasting allows you to do.
During my naval career, it was important for me to let the troops do the talking because they are our best ambassadors. The employees are your best ambassadors.
Absolutely, they are.
And you better hope that they like the company. Otherwise, you're doing something wrong.
That's right. And they're the best ambassadors because they aren't the one who gets the paycheck when someone makes a sale, right?
Right.
They're just part of the process.
Right.
They get to see the real deal from the inside out,
Yeah.
which is fantastic.
Yeah.
The other thing about podcast is, now this is a complicated setup. We have cameras, we have multiple cameras, and we're in the studio and we're doing this stuff
Right.
because we have the ability to do that. We're set up for it,
Right.
because that's what we do for a living. A podcast can be as complex as all of this, or it can be as simple as an app on an iPhone. Apps like Anchor, which is one of my favorite apps. I use it for my Saturday Morning Hustle podcast
Right.
because it's super simple. It's on the phone. That podcast is not as complex as this. It's me talking 5 minutes straight to my audience. It's no big deal. And so I use the Anchor app. It's free. It's got a great ton of features on it. And it doesn't have to be this sort of production.
Right.
Or it can be if this is what your brand is, if this
Sure.
is what your business needs.
Sure.
So that's the more interesting thing too is obviously with video, you need lighting, you need a location. You can't shoot video while like just sitting in your car in the dark.
Right.
You
Or bouncing
can't-
along.
But you could record a podcast sitting on your couch in the dark.
Yeah.
If you don't feel like going into work today, record a podcast. You can't shoot video like that. So that's
Right.
another advantage to that as well.
Right. Exactly.
So there's huge advantages to podcast, but audio in general is making comeback as far as influence in marketing communications.
Yeah.
A great example is, how long have we been using jingles and theme songs in advertising, right? Forever.
Right. Forever.
It's because it works. It's because it connects in your brain and it gives you something to remember, and that becomes brand awareness, which
Right.
is front of mind, right? You kind
Right.
of sing the little song. There's 100 songs, and Carrie, everyone right now is like, there's a song that just popped in your head,
Right,
right?
exactly.
There's a jingle that just popped in your head. Whatever it is, that's the power of audio and the connection to our brain.
Yeah.
So there's
And it started with radio.
Absolutely.
And television picked it up. So it's, it's
So
been
we're back
around
to radio.
as an audio.
It's back to radio because it actually works.
Yeah.
Digital transmission, right? It's on a smartphone or it's on a different format. So having audio, whether it's a sponsored by in a podcast or using theme songs, or now a lot of collaborations between brands and on actual musicians.
And musicians, you bet.
I've seen 3 rappers this week, known entities, people you've heard of,
Right.
doing customized raps for brands
Right.
to introduce a brand or an idea or a concept or and so it's collaboration between the creative and the commercial side of things,
Right.
which is fantastic. And that also brings influencer marketing.
And we had that discussion about the mix of marketing and
Right.
artist a couple
Exactly.
of podcasts ago.
Right. JB Williams,
Yeah.
my name is JB on social media, is a great example of that. His influence, it comes across audio and video,
Yeah.
which brings us to influencer marketing, which of course is also a huge item happening today. But it doesn't have to be just video and photography on social media as influencer marketing. Audio is influencer
Audio.
marketing as well.
Absolutely.
So sponsoring podcasts, we talked about that earlier. You want to sponsor the podcast of someone who has the attention of the audience you want. Well, that makes them an influencer.
Right.
It's influencer marketing. See, all of this circles back, right?
Well, and they have to match up with your values and beliefs as well, or otherwise it's not a good fit, and people figure that out real quick.
Exactly. The last piece is news is being delivered completely different,
Yeah.
right? We started off with, you have 1 or 2, 3 news stations back in the 50s, 60s, even the 70s. I
Right.
remember when I was a kid.
That's when UHF came
We had to
in.
go over and turn the knob on it
Right.
because there was even remote controls yet, right?
Right.
Now we're inundated with news, and a lot of it's coming across on our smart devices.
Right.
Right. So some people might say, "Hey, Pritch, we don't need PR anymore. We have social media and smart devices." Well, I know you have a reaction to that. What's your
I
reaction
do.
to that?
Is this an M-rated show or is this a GP-rated show? How about bull hockey? That'll be my initial response to that. I think public relations is even more important today than it's ever been. And I do think you've heard me say this before, I think we've done ourselves a disservice by calling it public relations. It should be public relationships.
Yes.
And relationships exist for an organization to help an organization meet its goal across a broad range of stakeholders, not just the consumer, but the legislative piece. I mean,
Absolutely.
you pass a piece of legislation, you can kill a company right away if it's not favorable to that operation. The community around the organization, and of course the news media is still important,
They play their role.
They play their
and there's
role.
still plenty of people turning on the TV at 5
Right.
o'clock and 10 o'clock to
Right.
get their information that way.
Right.
Just not as many.
Not as many. And it bothers me that there are still so many PR, public relations firms that are only doing media, because there's so much more to it. I understand over time you build those relationships, and those are important, but I'm not sure that the continuity in the newsroom is what it used to be, and so those relationships over time are few and far between anymore. So I absolutely need us to think about public relations as more than just media relations. It's about the community, it's about your shareholders, it's about your stakeholders, your consumers, and even unto that public affairs piece, government and legislative agencies.
And you mentioned earlier that you poll your students. So
Yep.
you have college students, right? 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, the
Right.
future, right? The
Yep.
leading edge of technology, the people who are paying attention to all the trends first, right?
Right.
You're connected to them, you're talking to them, and they're telling you the same thing, right?
Absolutely the same thing. Where they are indeed digital natives, and that term's been around
True.
for a long time. What we need to
Yeah,
work
if you're
with.
20 years old right now, you don't know
Yeah.
life before the internet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and you probably don't know life without an iPhone.
Probably not. Not at least
or
adult
a
life.
cell phone anyway, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the strategy behind the use of the tool that is most important, and that's my job in the schoolhouse.
Yes.
Is to help impart that knowledge, that focus on strategy as opposed to just the tool.
There you go. So once again, the conversation goes back to the core idea, which is how do you communicate in 2018? Pay attention to your audience. Where is their attention?
Right.
How are people consuming the information you're trying to provide them as a marketer, advertiser, as a communicator, whether it's a consumer, the general public, stakeholders, people who make decisions, etc. Right?
Right.
However we're trying to communicate to people, it's different today than it was last week, last
Oh, it
month, last year.
absolutely is.
And it's going to change again.
Yeah, you bet.
So you got to stay tied to who's pushing the trends and what they're going to be, and not get so locked into here's how we've always done it.
Right.
You got to experiment. I think I want to leave the audience with this idea today. So marketing is it's always adjusting, right? It's always moving. So you need to experiment. You need to get outside of your bubble and do some things you wouldn't normally do in order to understand whether you can go in that direction or not. And sponsoring podcast or appearing on podcast, being a guest on a podcast like this, etc., allows you to reach into new audiences in new ways, in really small ways. It doesn't take $50,000 to sponsor a podcast.
Right.
Someone out there probably wants $50K, but someone else also wants $50, and someone wants $500, and someone $5,000
Right.
for sponsorship for 6 months or a year or one episode. Experiment. Go find some things, use their influence, see how it works, measure some things out, push some people to some things you can look at as a marketing entity and figure out if it's working or not. But get outside your bubble, because this change from traditional to digital to hybrid to who knows what's
Whatever's
next,
coming next.
it's going to get faster and faster and faster.
Now, I can hear people in our listening audience going, okay, that's great, Kyle, but I've got my head down and my plate full, so how the hell do I stay up on what's going on?
Well, that's your job.
Yes.
If it's too much for you, go work 9 to 5 in some office somewhere. I hate to be harsh, folks, but if you want to be successful,
Right.
if you want to kill it, if you want to make a lot of money, if you want to drive profits, you have to be thinking like this. You have to be progressive. You have to be experimenting. You have to be measuring everything you do.
Right.
You have to be moving in these ways. If it's too fast for you, go work for
it's
someone
probably
else
not
and
the
let
right
someone
field.
else lead you around.
Exactly.
If you want to drive the process and really be an innovator, you got to do this. You can't be afraid of it.
I had a colleague tell me, and this related to academic scholarship and the road to tenure, but I think it's equally applicable to this. Take an hour out of a week and do your homework. Read. And you got to, I'm in a great position because I've got all these youngsters around me keeping me up to speed. But if you can take some time out, maybe it's not an hour, maybe it's 5 minutes a day, whatever, to scan the environment
or
and
listen to
and
podcasts.
listen to I like
go.
the way you did that.
There you go.
That's awesome. Wait a minute. What's your sign say? You are a big deal.
Big deal right there. Listen to podcasts, read articles. When you say reads, someone out there pictured a novel. I got to
Right.
read a novel.
Right,
no,
right. No.
read articles, read blog posts, listen to podcasts, watch other people who are doing it well,
Yep.
and follow their lead. But have the attitude of always be looking new, always be pushing, always be adjusting, and understand it's going to change.
Well, and again, back to your point, if you're not staying up with things, then you're not doing your job effectively.
There you go.
And you probably need to think about doing something else.
We're going to come back to this idea and go deeper with some different ideas about audio in the future. We're looking forward to having you guys with us on the NeoMarketing Podcast as well. We'll see you again in 2 weeks, the second Wednesday of the month, for the new version of the NeoMarketing Podcast. In the meantime, if you have questions, you have input, you think we're on the right track or wrong, hit us up on social media. Let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your input. Till next time, good luck.
Ciao.